A very warm welcome to the program, People, Politics and Power. I am Imonia Marire. Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, has continued to grapple with several challenges. Over 6 decades after independence, its vast potentials, constrained by an infrastructure deficit that hampers economic growth, social development, and national competitiveness. From crumbling roads to epileptic power supply, inadequate water systems to congested ports, the country's foundational systems continue to struggle to meet the demands of a rapidly growing population and an increasingly complex economy. The challenge is not merely a lack of infrastructure, but a legacy of neglect, poor maintenance, and policy inconsistencies. Decades of underinvestment, corruption, and bureaucratic deficiencies have left the country with a transportation network riddled with potholes, power generation that fails to light up homes, and industries and urban centers where water supply is erratic at best. Despite numerous reforms, ambitious master plans, and foreign investments, progress remains sluggish, and the gap between infrastructure needs and available resources remains wide. The story of Nigeria's infrastructure crisis is one of struggle, stagnation, and the search for sustainable solutions. The federal government is estimated to owe trillions of naira to construction companies for completed or ongoing and even abandoned infrastructure projects, including roads and bridges. Strategically, infrastructure serves as a rule the fuel for a nation's development and economic growth. Now, what are the consequences of Nigeria's huge infrastructure deficit? Where does the problem lie? Is it with funding, or is it with inefficiency or the lack of skilled manpower? What approaches should be adopted at national and sub-national levels to address this situation? These are the issues we will be looking at today as we look at Nigeria's infrastructure deficit and, of course, a tale of broken systems. My guests are in the studio, and one other will be joining us online very shortly. And that's when we return from this short break. We will get to meet them. Stay with us.
Nigeria of our dream, the Nigeria we need, is the united, indissoluble, and cohesive Nigeria which guarantees equity, fairness, justice, and prosperity for its citizens. That is our focus on people, politics, and power. It is fresh, insightful, impactful. It's a must-watch. People, politics, and power on AIT. When the issues are critical, germane to Nigeria's democratic process,
politicians can only be seen maybe on television by judges. They should not intermingle, because once you intermingle, then you destroy the systems.
When the personalities are big, important to national discourse.
When you reach certain stage in power and you demonstrate arrogance to the extreme, there's no other thing that will happen to you other than to fall.
When the developments are seemingly complex, confounding like a 1,000-piece jigsaw, that's when we require bold, sound, and analytical minds to help put the pieces together. Jigsaw with Benga Arileba, now showing Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. on AIT. Jigsaw, demystifying the issues.
Thank you so much. Let's get to meet our guest analyst who is in the studio. Dr. Ibrahim Dauda is a development consultant. Thank you so much for finding time to join us.
Thank you.
All right, we will be joined virtually, and he will be joining us from Port Harcourt in the Rivers State capital, Dr. Solomon Edebiri, who is the president, West Africa Institute of Welding. He'll be joining us in a short while. But let's begin from here, Dr. Dauda. What do you consider to be the main infrastructure gaps in the Nigeria of today?
Well, thank you very much. When you look at Nigeria today and the context of infrastructure gap, infrastructure deficit is basically the difference or the gap between the present infrastructure and what is supposed to be there to make economy and public life run smoothly. Now, from roads to the rail networks, to our waterways, to our air transport systems, and the overall logistics system, and the supporting infrastructure, talking of power, water, gas, communication. There is a gap that has been, slowing down the process of development over the years. And coupled with the population of the country and the rapid growth, it is also not helping matters. So there exists a huge gap in infrastructure deficit. Looking at the population, where we are today, and where Nigeria will be in the next 50 years, at where we're coming from. Some of these infrastructures are as far back as either from independence or from the 80s down. And a lot of them have seriously, dilapidated.
So how huge is this gap vis-a-vis the Nigerian population, a population that is constantly growing?
The gap is huge if you look at the population of Nigeria. For example, if you are going to travel now, take any average road in Nigeria. The time it will take you to go through a particular route from point A to point B, the traffic that you are going to go through to exit that route, because the population is huge, the road is limited, so the impact, it's slowing down processes. The journey of 6 hours takes you 12 hours. The journey of 2 hours takes you 6 hours, either because of the condition of the road or because of the high traffic, because the road network is inadequate. So the population is huge and there is no reciprocating increase in the infrastructure to align with the population growth.
That can also be said of the electricity sector.
It's the same thing. The electricity sector has a different dimension, because if you look at Nigeria from the beginning, generation of power, transmission of power, distribution of power has been a centralized process from the time of the NEPA period down the time of the privatization, when you have the GENCOs, the TCN, and then the distribution channels. But still, there are underlying problems that have continued to bedevil the power sector, which people may think it's only funding, but it's not only funding that is the problem. You can access funding if you have data, viable data. Now, there is what you call asset investment planning. It's a process that is deployed in managing infrastructure development. It is from initiation to development to maintenance and beyond. It brings into focus or into play different things: digital, satellite-based imaging system. For example, you are building the Niger Bridge today, the second Niger Bridge. If you deploy the AIP system, you will do a study of a year plus to calculate on daily basis how many trucks, tankers, lorries, commuters ply this road. You take an average over a year, and then it gives you the weight and the mass that goes through this bridge, and then you calculate based on the design of the bridge how many years it's supposed to be based on particular weight of mass that is going through it on daily basis. So if you use the AIP system, it will tell you based on this particular weight, maybe it's 3 times what this bridge is designed to carry. Instead of 60 years, this bridge will begin to collapse in the next 15 years. And what does that tell you? You begin to do 2 things. Either you begin to strengthen the bridge, or you begin to plan expansion and building another bridge. So it saves you, time, it saves you cost, it saves you a lot of problems because you are always ahead of the problem. But we adopt mostly the reactive and maintenance approach. We wait until these wear and tears come in, and when they come in, then we deploy maintenance. And by that time, and even at the maintenance level, sometimes it comes slowly because of certain factors that has to do with bureaucracy, administration, procurement, and the rest of them. By the time you are going to repair point A, when you finally get proper approval to repair point A, the damages have gone to point B and C. Then you come back again. By the time you go back, it has gone to point D and E. So we need
and of course, cost would have increased over time, over that
you have
period.
variations all the time because this equipment will not be static in price. So there are a lot of scientific approaches and methodologies that are employed today globally to predict and analyze the lifespan of projects in vis-a-vis the population and the wear and tear. You have the climate change, weather, you have insecurity, you have vandalization, you have a lot of other factors that culminate into the wear and tear of infrastructure.
All right, let's bring in and welcome Dr. Solomon Edebiri, who is now joining us virtually from Port Harcourt in the River State capital. Dr. Edebiri, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, we are looking at the infrastructure deficit in Nigeria. The first question to ask you straight away, what are the primary causes of infrastructure deficit in Nigeria as of today? As we know it, there are, for instance, it's said to have over just one sector. Look at the housing sector, for instance, has over 20 million housing deficit in that sector alone. We're not talking of railways, we're not talking of roads, we're not talking of bridges and other infrastructure, power sector and all of that. What do you think are the primary causes of our infrastructure deficit over 6 decades after Nigeria's independence?
Thank you, Mr. Imoni. Thank you for bringing me back here again. Been a long while. The causes of our infrastructure deficit shouldn't be strange to anybody. We are aware that we live in an environment where quality is compromised, right from design, from specification, material selection, onto the construction. We compromise on every level, at every level of the process. We compromise. We compromise on design. We compromise on material selection. We compromise on putting the materials together to get the structure up. And at the end of the day, even when the structure is up and quality is a bit up, we compromise on maintenance. And if you travel out of the country, you see buildings that are like 150 years, 100 years, 100 years. They are still in serviceable condition. Now, let me give you an example. Some buildings that collapsed in Lagos, you will remember, if you recall, that the buildings were designed to 4-story building, 5-story building. Then you see the owner of the house taking it to 10-story buildings. When the foundation had been set to hold 5-story building. So this design has been compromised. Quality has been compromised. And again, let's look at it from the welding sector and narrowing it to the iron and steel sector. If you go to see our iron bars, what is there for you as 12 rod? If you take your caliper and measure it, it's not up to 11 it's just barely 10 What they're selling for you for 16 rod is barely 14 And now you design a house, a structure, and you say the columns are going to be reinforced with 16 bars. And you go to the market to buy 16 based on the design. But what you eventually will have is So there's a problem with quality assurance, quality control in our country. Where does these rods pass into the country? Our Jakarta State Complex, and we were just trying to get it off. I've spoken on that many times past, many years past, on what we can do. If we have the production going on here, we're producing rods, we're producing everything, and the quality control assurance is up to speed, we will make sure 16 is 16 Look at the ones coming in from overseas, especially China. How are we monitoring the standard that are coming in of the materials? Who is monitoring them? It's supposed to be standard organization of Nigeria. But are they up to speed with their work? So how do we measure these rods that come? They come in tons. How do we determine and assure the public that what is coming as 16 as 4 as 14 as 12 they come in that light? They don't. If you live here, Mr. Money, go to the market and buy rod, take a caliper and measure it. You'll come back to me and say, Solomon, you were right. That is the first thing. We compromise a lot on everything. And then we watch our standard drop, the quality of materials that we are supposed to have, build our infrastructure, they drop. And along the line, we watch the infrastructure decay without adequate maintenance and repairs. What do we have? Collapse. And this is the big infrastructure of the economy. This is the problem we are facing. And if we don't fix it from the design stage, through the material selection, standard quality assurance, and then embed the culture of maintenance and repairs in due time, then we're going to have to deal with this devil called infrastructure deficit.
So, Dr. Edebiri, when you talk about these compromise, standards and quality, quantity, and what have you, compromise almost at every level, does that have any bearing with the lack of the skilled manpower in the Nigerian system? Or is it just that businessmen and businesswomen, or indeed businesses, are deliberately making these compromises when they know that it will, in the end, affect the quality of services that they provide?
Thank you, Mr. Mon. You know, issue of skills deficit is another game in Nigeria entirely. We are dealing with that deal. Skills deficit is a major challenge. Because what every country should pride itself of is skills competency in its country. In Nigeria, go to its effect on for projects that are ongoing. We want to train for specific projects. That's not how it's done anywhere in the world in terms of skill development. You train for future projects. You train workforce for the future. So the projects come to meet competent workforce. You're not looking at the project and say, okay, I have, for instance, I want to construct a railway, 1,000 kilometer railway starting tomorrow, so I want to train people to do it now. You forecast, in 5 years' time, we'll be constructing 10-kilometer railway, 20-kilometer railway. In 20 years' time, this is what I'll go. Are we ready in terms of competency in the area of skills? What skills do we need to do this? We need design skill, we need medicine skill, we need welding skill. All the skills that we need, do we have them? Then the government begins to look at that and say, oh, we really don't have this. We need to start working ahead of it. And we can go on to power, we can go on to what do you call it? Airways, airports, and all. We can go on and on in all sectors. All of them have need for certain kind of skill. So they're bringing it down to infrastructure deficit. It's a composite thing. The greed of the project owner, the greed probably of the contractor, will lead to feeding incompetent hands in getting on the project. And all this will sum up to what? Infrastructure deficit. The infrastructure is going to collapse. And when you don't have enough hands-on people, maintenance is a problem. I'm going to ask you one question and ask the viewers. If you have a plumbing problem in your house, it's going to take you a while to get a competent plumber to come and fix it for you. If you have a cracked wall, you are going to find a little problem, electrical problem. So we are facing skills deficit, and that is leading to infrastructural deficit as well. So if you don't put all this together and get them fixed, we are going to continue to deal with this demon called infrastructure deficit because we are not playing by the rule. In engineering, the rule is simple. Get the design right, get the material selection right, get the mixture of the material, collecting the material, get them right, get the personnel right, and follow the design. Once all that is done, you have a solid structure. Then undertake routine maintenance, preventive maintenance. If you're able to do that, your infrastructure will last almost forever. Take, for instance, bridges. How often do we go to check the nature of our bridges? How do we look at the quality control? How often do we inspect the bridges? Is there any crack on the substructure? Is there any crack on the steel? Are we having problems on these bridges, the structure of the bridges? So what do we do? Last time they shut the Third Bridge down just because they want to do some maintenance. Yes, somebody has gone to look at it and said there's a problem with the structure of this bridge. We need to do maintenance on it. So let's shut it down. How often do we do something like that across the country? And how often do they even do that in Lagos on the Third Mainland Bridge? So we need to look at all the quality control is a major problem. It's a major challenge when it comes to infrastructure management. If you don't follow the right quality control and find out where the defects are coming from and how you are going to fix it and get the right repair procedure together and move in there and repair, we are going to continue to have this infrastructure deficit.
All right, let's take a short break. We'll be back in a moment and to continue our discussion on Nigeria's infrastructure deficit. Stay with us.
When the issues are critical, germane to Nigeria's democratic process,
Politicians can only be seen maybe on television by judges. They should not intermingle, because once you intermingle, then you destroy the systems.
when the personalities are big, important to national discourse.
When you reach certain stage in power and you demonstrate arrogance to the extreme, there's no other thing that will happen to you other than to fall.
When the developments are seemingly complex, confounding like a 1,000-piece jigsaw, that's when we require bold, sound, and analytical minds to help put the pieces together. Jigsaw with Benga Arileba, now showing Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. on AIT. Jigsaw, demystifying the issues.
Thank you so much for staying with us. Very much with us is Dr. Dauda. Dr. Dauda, we heard Dr. Edebiri talk about quality control and the role that every stakeholder in the sector ought to play, and which they are not playing, which may be contributing to the challenges that we have in the sector today. But let's look at what contributions both the private, the public sector, that's government, and of course the international partners can play in mitigating this situation that we have on our hands today.
Thank you. The categorization of infrastructure deficit, like you said, are into three components, or four rather. You have the federal government, the federal system, because if you ask an average youth on the street today to tell you the difference between trunk A, trunk B, trunk C roads, I assure you, out of 100, you may be lucky to get maybe 5 or 10. They don't know. And that is why you see a lot of people from the local level heap most of the blames on the central government. federal government. What is the limitation of what the federal government is supposed to do as regards infrastructure? What is the role of the state government? What is the role of the local government? What is the role of the private individuals, developers, and private sector? Each has a role to play. The role of the federal government, first, is policy. They have the responsibility to initiate policies, developmental policies, and do a developmental blueprint of the country entirely, looking at all the available data, statistics, population, areas, and every other factor that is needed. Then they capture the states and capture the local governments. Each area have a peculiarity unique to its own system. Having done that, the next is to plan the process, the initiating of the project. Roads, power, water, e-communication, etc., etc. Costing and the source of funding. Now, these are where the problems are. Federal roads today, state roads, local government roads, infrastructure, when you talk of the context of infrastructure within the developmental sector, principally you are talking about roads, power, water, communication. These are the framework and the bedrock of every development. And these are the responsibilities of government. Private sectors can key into it. If a government is opening up a new district today, anywhere in the country, either a state government or federal government or local government, when they do their design of the district, the first thing they do there is to put roads, make it accessible.
Open it up.
The next thing, drainage system, sewage system, water, power, gas, communication. This is the responsibility of government. Then the private individuals come in. They take in a plot of land, build a structure, and then tap into these infrastructures that were brought in by government, and then take it into the structure they've built. So the connection between the federal, the private, or the government and private sector go simultaneously. But where we have a problem is the development partners abroad or the foreign partners. For example, let me give a simple example of the United Arab Emirates. 40 years ago, where were they? It was almost a desert. Now they came together and decided, we want to change the system. It started with the thinking, a vision. And they designed a process, taking into consideration 3 or 4 things. First, what does the world want? People travel for what purpose? Tourism? To see something that is old, thousands of years old, hundreds of years old of history? To see something that is extraordinary, that does not exist anywhere? Something new? Or a commercial process, hub? Now, United Arab Emirates took these things into their planning scheme. And they looked at the whole world and looked at every major city in the world and look at what the major thing they have that attract people to it. And they bested it in all ramifications. And what happened? They didn't do it presently. They look at future. They planned ahead. Okay, if we are building an airport today, in the next 20 years, because of the particular infrastructures we are putting, this airport will now not be big enough to accommodate the travelers that will be coming through the airport. So they made a plan of expand. That is where I said asset investment planning. You predict the future and you put it into your scheme of plans.
Future planning.
Yes. And when you do that, Dubai government did not put money in building Dubai. They conceptualized the design. They brought infrastructure, roads, water, power, the basic things, and then they market it. When you, okay, I come to your place, and I'm a stockbroker, and I want to trade, and then the data went off, no network, and within that period of 10 minutes before the network comes back, I lost thousands of dollars, or thousands of nairas, or millions. Now what happened? There's a gap in communication processes. The communication system is not efficient. Will I come back to that place? I will be discouraged next time to come back. So efficiency in infrastructural management is critical. So we shouldn't mix the two. Government's responsibility is not to build every infrastructure that is supposed to be built. The major responsibility of government is to provide the basics, power, road, water, and then you create the enabling environment that will attract investors. And then you bring the policy agencies to monitor quality, like Doctor has said. That's why you have the COREN, the Architecture Registration Council, and the rest of them. They are all, regulatory and enforcement agencies that ensure quality. Now, it is the duty of those institutions to now make sure that private investors that are coming to invest, to utilize those, infrastructure brought in by government, adhere strictly to quality. And then from the part of government, they do performance measurement, performance, management, to make sure that the supervising institutions also do their job to curtail corruption that will, bring about cutting corners, like you said, quality assurance, and the rest of them.
So, Dr. Adebiri, flowing from that, what do you think should be the kind of governance reforms that we need to see at this point in time? Because the African Development Bank says, for instance, that given the state of Nigeria's infrastructure deficit at the moment, Nigeria needs an estimate of between 100 and 150 billion dollars every year over the next 10 years to be able to come up to standard in terms of infrastructure provision. What kind of governance reforms is required to get this going?
Thank you, Doctor. If we put in about $150 billion or whatever currency into our infrastructure development, and we do not do the needful, we do not do what is right, that money will sink into the well as well. That will not flow anywhere. Now, like I said earlier, government must put together the right institutions to ensure quality control and standards. Our major problem is right from construction stage is we compromise on standards. Now, the people who are expected to go on the quality control inspection, the process inspection, to ensure that the process is right, also compromise. Most often than not, they don't even get there. Now, for construction work to occur, you start from the design stage. So, do we have people who monitor the design? I can tell you yes. They take it from design stage to construction, to material selection, because during the design, there will have been material specification. So from there, you take it to material selection. Now, when you select material, are the right people there? So you see the process, how it is going down. The people are not going to be there to say, oh, we need a 4x8 HB to take the structure up, or a 6x12 HB to take the structure up. And the man who is doing the selection, compromising on quality because he wants to save cost, at the end of the day, instead of using a 6x12 HB, he decided to use a 4x8. The strength of the structure has been compromised. So because the people are not there right at that moment, and from there they move on, and they keep going, you do not have anybody to monitor this. So I'm saying government should set up the right institution for infrastructure monitoring. And that infrastructure development monitoring, right from the beginning, I know there are institutions, you have COREN, you have Ministry of Works, and other quality control systems, but are they doing their job? We need to be specific. To say, look, in every state, we won't have domiciled infrastructure development monitoring agency, where they have to specify or assure, go and double check that the standard that was designed, the specifications that were put in the design are being utilized during the construction stage, because that's where we miss it, because we want to make more money. Then secondly, government should also look at the issue of corruption. In pricing the project, when you do not build in corruption cost into the project you are pricing. And when the man says that in the process of doing the job, for him to completely execute that job, get his money out, he's going to part with so much money from beginning to the end. So the only thing he wants to do is compromise on the quality. That is a major act. So government should do what it wants to do to ensure that the corruption element in our infrastructure development are cured. They are seriously curbed. At the end, otherwise, the contractors will continue to cut corners. So that agency must exist. We must look at the standard again. What standard are we creating? We must look at the process. Are we monitoring the process properly? We must look at that. And we must also look at the maintenance specification. Do we have a maintenance specification procedure built into the system? Most of our infrastructure do not have maintenance procedure and specification built into the whole design. We must begin to do that. And then, to add to all this, we must look at the skills. Are we using the right skill for the right project? Are we using the right person to do the right job? We must also look at competency. So if we can put this competency to bear and say for every project, we need to have the right people, we need to have the right competency to do this job, so that person will ensure he adheres to all the standards that exist, that have been created, and ensure that this project will meet quality control at the end of the day. Because the quality control agency is not part of the design. It's not part of the construction. It's an external body that is not part of this whole stream. But his own is to come and ensure that this building has been, or this infrastructure has been put together in line with the specification that was put together in the design. And secondly, in terms of this quality control, it is not at the finished stage. So government should ensure that the right people on ground to monitor the process from, let me use building for instance. You are building a 12-story building from the foundation to ensure that that foundation can hold a 12-story structure. Then to the depth, to the columns, and keep going on. If you do not monitor it during this process by process, stage by stage, and see that the specifications are adhered to, we are going to have another problem. So government has a lot to do before we come to the investors, before we come to the contractors, and come to the people in general. Then we put all of them in a box, with everyone doing the right thing, then we can fight this infrastructure deficit.
Very quickly, Dr. Debri, how do you suggest that government will address the corruption element that you talked about?
We need reorientation. I think it's main reorientation. Reorientation, our commitment to our fatherland. I think a lot of us have imbibed that feeling, that spirit of let me chop my own. This cannot be me go die for Nigeria. We have to be prepared to do so much for the country. I think Nigeria need to do so much reorientation on anti-corruption, on fighting this corruption, getting people to understand that if we put all the forces together, putting the figures where they should be, ensuring that projects meet the standard and quality that was designed to meet, I can assure you we'll get better infrastructure and our system will be better. I think we just need more education. We are not listening. Whether we hear or not, but I think we are not listening. We do not understand the effect of corruption in our society. It affects us. It's also affecting the unborn children. So government need to really focus extensively on this reorientation. If we have an anti-corruption agency, must focus on the orientation of the people and strict penalty to those who are found guilty of getting involved in corruption. But I must tell you, it has to come from the top onto the bottom. Right from the top, even to the tomato seller. It's an endemic thing. A tomato seller is going to put beautiful tomato on top of the basket and put the rotten ones at the bottom and tell they are beautiful. This is all corruption. But if the top, like the Turkish parable says, that the rot of a fish starts from the head. So if the top can cure all this menace that is coming from there and be ready to fight this cankerworm, I can assure you Nigeria will be in for a better tomorrow.
All right, Dr. Debris, stay with us. Dr. Dauda, I'll come back to you. He's just talked about the impact of this deficit and all the issues around it and how that affects the daily lives of the ordinary Nigerian. When we have this huge gap that you talk about, how is it affecting the daily lives of the ordinary Nigerian? And I like to pack that along with the fact that the African Development Bank is saying, look, you need about $150 billion every year for 10 years, consistently for 10 years, to cure this deficit. Where would that kind of money come from?
Well, you see, like I said, development is not a centralized process. And that is the big mistake we make. We have centralized development, we have centralized job creation, we have centralized poverty alleviation, and I've said it some time ago, which I'm happy is happening now, the autonomy of the local governments. All the issue we are talking about, infrastructure deficit, if you look at the pre-colonial, post-colonial era up to the 70s and 80s, the local government is the nucleus. If you go to the works department of the local government, then it was a beehive of activity.
And even in the First Republic,
Exactly.
the regional governments were quite active.
So what that does is, you know, it takes the pool of pressure back to the community level. You have roads, they execute roads, feeder roads, bridges, they do rural electrification projects, they do agricultural projects, they create, you know, cottage industries, and that is the bedrock of development. And that is the initiative the Chinese are using. Our problem is we have reversed it here. The federal government wants to do everything. Example, we have a plant near in Kogi called Gamma Irradiation Plant. Many Nigerians don't even know that thing exists. It's the biggest in Africa. What it does is, if you go to ShopRite and other places today, you buy tuna fish, you buy all assorted type of fish that you can only get in the high seas. Some of them are brought in from Japan. Why do you think they are brought in and they are still fresh? They pass through gamma irradiation. We have the biggest in Africa. But you know the problem? When this thing was built, there was no road network to it. There was no rail network to it. So it was just built there, and there is no logistics plan around it to evacuate what to talk about the impact on the common man now. These farmers, if I have the man that has a tomato farm in Gombe that is of export quality, and he wants to export those tomatoes, he needs to pass it through irradiation process to qualify, because the time period from lifting fresh fruits and vegetables, let's say to Harold's store, anywhere is 6 hours from the farm to the store, global standard. Anything beyond that, they won't take it. So for him to pick his tomato to that gamma irradiation plant, to irradiate, because when you irradiate it, it will be there for 30, 40 days. It doesn't need refrigeration. It doesn't change anything. So the plant, since it has been built, it was not used. And we spend hundreds of millions maintaining it yearly. So the common man now, his tomato that is supposed to export through that cannot be exported and is rotting away. Secondly, the billions you're talking about, where will they be spent? That is the corruption aspect he spoke about. If these monies come in, as long as we continue to neglect the local government, we should forget about development in anywhere. Because you cannot develop a country by neglecting the local system where everyone is domiciled in. You go there, there are no roads, there are no water, there is no power. So how do you develop? There is a government there, but it is handicapped. The resources are hanging somewhere. So empowering the local system economically and otherwise is going to be one of the major things that will remove the pressure
from the central
from
government.
the central government
Yes.
and take it
so
down.
The central government should be ready to let go some of its resources and
down
responsibilities
to the local government level.
Yes.
And that is where development is going to take place. If you take, for example, now, you have 774 local government. If you put 1 billion per local government, that is 774 billion. It's not even up to 1 trillion. Now, if that 1 billion is deployed in that local government to do roads, water, power, captive power. Transparently. Now, one beautiful thing about people who say corruption, yes. The governor has immunity, isn't it?
But the local government
chairman does the local government chairman has immunity?
Doesn't have.
His mother is there, his father is there, he's there, his wife is there, everyone he has is there. Where will he take 1 billion and run away from leaving all these people behind? So even if he's mad, he will have to deploy at least 60 or 70% of their resources down there. And then what will happen? You will wake up one morning and you'll not see Keke Napep anywhere in the street because they will all go back. They have supply of chalk, supply of desk, supply of blackboard, supply of seats, supply of concrete, supply of cement. They will be worked. And that works department we used to know in the local government will come back to life.
All right. Well, our time is running out fast. Dr. Edebiri, very quickly, will Nigeria ever meet its infrastructure goals? Very quickly.
I think if we change our strategy on planning, like Dr. just said, if we do not plan right, ensuring that if you're putting infrastructure, a kind of infrastructure in a particular location, all the ancillary infrastructure we need to make that work are put in place. That's number one. Number two, we could get it right if our local government authorities begin to learn to be more responsible. I agree development is far closer to the people at the local government level. But have our local government authorities been able to show capacity, competency, an honest intention to develop the local area that they come from? If that is happening, I'm not sure any state government will be after them. A state government are taking advantage of the fact that most of the people placed at the local government, at the helm of affairs at the local government, are not showing capacity and they are not willing to do the right thing. Rather, they are making corruption as part of their own activity. So they must show capacity. And one thing I want to quickly add, yes, we get there. One of our major problems is in agriculture. Our storage and processing facilities are completely a disaster. Our local people do not have a storage facility in the local area and present facility in the local area that they can take their crops to, they can take their produce to, and then store it, and that can stay for a very long time. And sometimes ago, a lot of silos that they constructed were not maintained. Even the gas firing stations for those silos were not maintained. So how do you store your grains? So a lot of produce are all wasting away. And at the end of the day, we say there's hunger in the land. So I think government need to change their planning strategy. They need to look at some policies and review the policy. The beauty of policy is that it can always be reviewed in line with the current dictates. Policy is not a static thing. You keep reviewing it to meet the demands of the current dictates. That's what I think.
Thank you so much, Dr. Edebiri. Let's leave it at that. Dr. Solomon Edebiri is the president, West Africa Institute of Welding. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, Dr. Ibrahim Dauda, who is a development consultant, joined us here in the studio. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
This is an ongoing discussion, and of course, we can't continue to look at other aspects of the infrastructure deficit in Nigeria and how to mitigate the situation, how to modernize our infrastructure in Nigeria to meet up with modern infrastructure provisions around the world and be competitive as a country in the international arena. Thank you so much for investing your time with us. We'll see you again when we bring you a fresh edition of People, Politics, and Power. Bye for now.